Hunting mature bucks is tough. Oftentimes it all comes down to random chance, even if you think you haven't patterned. Is he going to relocate after the shift? Is he going to get up out of his bed before dark? Is he going to stay on your property during the rut? Is he going to survive gun season? Sometimes watching a deer grow for years and executing a well-formulated plan gets the job done. Sometimes sitting on a rut funnel and hoping by chance a decent buck walks by in range gets the job done too. There's no greater example of random chance getting the job done than the Dustin Huff buck. Now this story will begin a little different than most of the stories that broke earlier this year. Here at Exodus, we had the chance earlier this year to sit down with the two hunters who had 3 years of history with this historic buck.
Yeah, I mean, we picked up this particular property in 2018, went to check cameras real late season. It had this phenomenal looking 3-year-old on camera. And that kind of like kicked off the story of this deer. You know, everybody names their deer. We called this one Megatime Junior, just because of his potential. And he was already really heavy deer. He had broken off one side, but we could tell he had big potential.
So with the name Junior, it almost feels like there must have been a senior. So who was Megatine Senior?
Megatine Senior was a buck that had a very, very similar frame that we killed. It was I think at the time it was the number 3 archery typical in the state. They look a lot alike.
And what year was that again? Sorry, 13?
2013.
Yeah, and so that was that deer at 3, first carpal likely. And then so you're thinking that 4 years old, gosh, he's going to be a slammer.
As a 4-year-old, he showed up in January again, right after the season.
Mm-hmm.
But again, you're like, hey, he's alive. You know, you're ecstatic. Yeah. He goes from a 160 to in the upper 70s, 80s as a typical, which just on a trail camera pic, and we actually have video of him, just looks like he's bigger than the world, you know?
Yeah.
It's just, we're celebrating because he's still alive. We still got a chance, you know?
So he sticks around for, how long do you think at 4 years old did he stick around from,
he
till he shed?
He left, he was in there, like I said, about a month. And that's hard to tell because they all shed, you know, you have an idea, but they all shed it. He was out there probably mid-late February.
Any Velva pictures or anything like that the following year?
No, nothing.
Mm-hmm. And so we're sitting there, and it was Christmas night. Bam, he shows up on the property, and he daylights in 2020. And so Brad and I are instantly texting, we gotta go. We gotta go. And we were able to hunt him a couple of times on the farm after he daylighted. Never saw him.
Of course, Christmas was the best weather day.
Yeah.
You know, late season with cold front moving through, super high pressure.
And that is where Dustin's story with the buck begins. While he sat in his tree stand in November of 2021, his hope was to top his personal record of 134 inches. He's hunted the same 185-acre farm since he was 10 years old. Every year, Dustin takes a break from touring during the last week of October and first week of November to hunt his favorite farm. On November 4th, he scaled up the tree in a climber for the day, hoping something would walk by. As the day came and went, not a single deer came by. Huff was about to call it a day when he saw movement down in the creek bottom about 70 yards away. A giant buck had his nose to the ground, and for a second, Huff honestly thought it was a moose. He watched as the buck started to come his way, and he reached for his crossbow as the buck closed the distance. The once-in-a-lifetime deer stopped broadside at 40 yards, and Huff squeezed the trigger and watched as the deer took off. The deer ran about 60 yards, stood there flickering his tail, and then stumbled down the ravine. When the buck ran down the ravine, Huff knew he was down for good. He raised his hands and screamed in excitement, still in shock at what he had just experienced. As Huff walked down the ravine, there was no ground shrinkage on the gigantic deer. It just kept getting bigger and bigger the closer he got. He had never seen a deer that big, and he was quoted in an interview saying, "In my mind, I was thinking it had to be a 180-inch deer." Once they got the buck home, they started doing measurements. As the inches started to add up, the group started getting more and more excited as the total number started to approach that magical 200-inch mark. When it was all said and done, the group standing around the buck tallied 213 inches and started checking Google. Huff saw that the Indiana record at that time was 195 inches, and then looked at the world record and couldn't believe his eyes. Word spread quickly about the giant buck, and neighbors soon started coming in to see the once-in-a-lifetime deer for themselves. One of those neighbors was in a tree that night, close enough to Huff that he could hear Huff and a couple friends talking and dragging the deer out. Another neighbor came forward and actually had the buck's sheds from the previous year. That rack was a mainframe 11-pointer that they estimated to gross 195 inches. After the mandatory 60-day drying period, the buck was officially scored and entered into the Boone and Crockett record books at the number 2 typical all-time and the largest typical ever taken in the United States. The buck grossed 216 and 2/8 and netted 211 and 4/8, overtaking the legendary Jordan buck by nearly 5 inches and only coming up 2 1/8 inches short of the current world record Milo Hansen buck. This buck is what hunters' dreams are made of when it comes to chasing big, typical whitetails. Each main beam measures well over 26 inches in length, with the right main beam being 28 right on the dot. The tallest point on the rack is the left G2 coming in at a whopping 13 6/8. And what's even more impressive is this deer does not have a single mass measurement under 5 inches. With a 21 4/8 inch inside spread, this deer's frame is simply mind-blowing. Dustin spent the springtime touring with the deer to numerous trade shows and events to let everyone have a chance to see this magnificent whitetail. Giant deer like this only come around every so often, but it seems like with modern farming practices and modern hunting techniques, these deer are showing up more and more. Who knows where the next world-class deer will come from? It could be states like Iowa or Illinois, or it could be a state that no one saw coming. That's the beauty with whitetail hunting. You never know what's right around the corner.
Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you want to support what we're doing here at Exodus, be sure to hit the subscribe button or head to our website, exodusoutdoorgear.com, and use the code whitetail to save 10% off our entire site for a limited time. You can save 10% on the Exodus Render, a Verizon 4G LTE camera backed by our 5-year no BS warranty, or our brand new Exodus MMT arrows, which are tailored built to your hunting specs. Be sure to check that out on our website. Until next time, see ya.